3 years ago, my world was upended. I tried to warn my brother-in-law about his wife's infidelity, and in return, my own life began to unravel. Karma had a way of catching up, and the consequences for those involved were nothing short of life-changing. This story is long, but I promise it's worth hearing, so bear with me. I'm a 37-year-old woman, and I had been married to my now ex-husband, Liam, for a decade. At the start, it was bliss, everything seemed perfect. Our marriage had its hiccups, but nothing that was truly insurmountable. The only real bumps in the road were caused by his family, but even those were minor inconveniences I learned to either tolerate or brush off. Liam and I were a team, and at that time, nothing could break us. His family, though, had a deep bond, one that wasn't easy to break into. His older sister, Emily, was 46, married to Jonathan, 48, who was my ex-brother-in-law. They had 2 children, and Emily had opted to be a stay-at-home mom. The kids were the light of Liam's life. He adored them and showered them with affection. They were well-behaved, easy to love, and I couldn't help but do the same. I was the fun aunt, always there to add excitement to their lives. Everything seemed perfectly fine. But things began to shift about 5 years ago. Liam and I hit a financial rough patch. I had taken a break from work to focus on my mental health. My job had been a toxic nightmare, no boundaries, no respect for my time, and an endless demand to be available at a moment's notice. My bosses? Completely unsupportive. Mentally, I was drained and at a breaking point. I needed to step away. Liam, being the caring husband he was, fully supported my decision. Our finances were always kept separate for personal expenses, but we did share a joint account for household things, groceries, bills, date nights, everything we did together. The contributions were based on our incomes, so since he earned more than I did, his share of the contributions was higher. But everything was fair, we both pitched in the same percentage of our income. Before I left my job, I carefully reviewed my finances and knew I could afford the break. I never expected or asked for him to pick up my slack. In fact, when he suggested it, I immediately shot down the idea. I didn't want to upset the delicate balance we had set up. I had enough savings to cover my share until I was ready to return to work. Liam's job at a multinational company was secure. There was no reason for us to fall into financial trouble. Then, 3 months into my time off, the mood changed. Liam became distant, moody, even irritable. If I suggested getting takeout instead of cooking, he'd snap. If I bought something new for myself, he'd scold me for it. At first, I brushed it off, but it didn't stop. The tension was palpable. Even when I spent money from my own savings, money he had no say over, he began acting strangely. It was unlike him. In all the years I'd known him, I'd never seen him try to control how I spent my own money. I confronted him. What was going on? At first, he deflected, but then his face hardened, and he admitted it. He gambled away almost all of our savings. Nearly everything we had was gone. He'd always been the one to handle our finances, and I had trusted him. I never even looked at my own accounts because I had complete faith in him. So, hearing this felt like a punch to the gut. I wanted to leave. Right then and there. He had taken everything from me, my hard-earned savings, my peace of mind, and all the while, I had been working on improving myself, taking a break from the chaos, only to have him drag us both into this mess. But reality hit. We weren't just struggling, we were on the verge of bankruptcy, and our home was about to be repossessed. In the midst of this chaos, I scrambled. I applied to any job I could find, hoping something would come through quickly. I even urged Liam to talk to Jonathan for help, he was rich, after all. But Liam refused, insisting that his brother shouldn't know about our troubles. It made no sense. Here we were, facing the destruction of everything we had built, and Liam's pride was standing in the way of salvation. Finally, I took matters into my own hands. I called Jonathan, explained everything, and without hesitation, he helped us. Yet, Liam couldn't see past his own ego. Instead of thanking me, he lashed out, accusing me of emasculating him in front of his brother. As if I had somehow undermined him by doing what needed to be done to save us. That was the tipping point. I couldn't take it anymore. He had single-handedly destroyed everything we'd worked for, not just financially, but emotionally. We were on the brink of starting over, and he cared more about his pride than our future. I told him that if he couldn't get his act together, there would be no baby. He had made one mistake after another, and now everything was at risk. In the months that followed, we slowly started to rebuild. With Jonathan's help, we repaid every cent we owed, but things were never the same between Liam and me. He remained bitter, resentful that I had reached out for help, and the cracks in our relationship deepened. While I wanted to make things work, the damage had been done. But then, something else happened that would finally shatter my respect for him forever. Things had started to feel a bit better, but during family gatherings, I couldn't ignore the tension that was building between Emily and Jonathan. It was subtle at first, like the quiet ripple of something ominous beneath the surface, but I could feel it. I knew it wasn't my place to meddle, but I couldn't shake off the concern I felt, especially for Jonathan. The unease gnawed at me, and so I confided in Liam, asking if he had sensed the same thing. Was I imagining it, or was there really something off? Liam brushed it off, telling me I was overthinking, that nothing was wrong. But 2 days later, something happened that made my heart race with anxiety. I went to Emily's house to drop off some tarts for the kids. They loved them, and I loved seeing their faces light up. But as soon as Emily opened the door, I noticed how hurried she was. Her movements were sharp, almost frantic. She seemed eager to get rid of me, urging me to leave faster than usual. The oddness of it struck me hard. Something was up. I stayed in my car for a moment after leaving, just to watch, to see if I could figure out what was going on. Call it creepy if you want, but my gut was screaming at me that something wasn't right, and I wasn't going to ignore it. And then, my suspicions were confirmed. I watched as a man came out of the house. Emily was there, standing in the doorway, seeing him off. At first, I didn't know what to think. But then I saw the way he was dressed. He had a cap pulled low over his face, his posture slouched as if he was trying to hide his identity. His body language screamed that he didn't want anyone to see him. And Emily? She looked guilty. The air around her felt thick with something unspoken. My heart dropped. In that moment, I knew she was cheating on Jonathan. The realization hit like a punch to the stomach. The audacity. The betrayal. I wanted to confront her right then, to scream and make her admit it, but I hesitated. I was terrified of her reaction, unsure whether it was even the right thing to do. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. I had to tell Liam what I'd seen. I needed someone to understand, to share in the shock, the disbelief. But when I did, the response I got was nothing like I expected. I thought he'd be outraged, or maybe disgusted. Maybe even as shocked as I was. But instead, he was eerily calm. He didn't react the way I thought he would. He asked me, in that quiet way of his, if I told anyone else. No, I said, but the hesitation in his voice made my blood run cold. A sigh of relief escaped him, and then, his words hit me like a slap. You need to keep this quiet. Don't tell anyone what you saw. I stared at him, completely stunned. Was he seriously asking me to stay silent about this? To let Jonathan live in the dark while his wife was betraying him? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You've lost your mind, I said. How could he expect me to ignore what I knew, to let his sister continue to destroy someone else's life without saying anything? But Liam just stood there, trying to convince me that we didn't know the whole story. Maybe they have an open marriage, he suggested, as if that somehow made it okay. I shot back, my voice shaking with frustration. You know Jonathan well enough to know that he would never agree to something like that. And even if he had, we need to make sure she isn't lying. We have to talk to him. My mind was set, I wasn't backing down. I was going to speak to Jonathan first. But Liam wouldn't hear it. He kept coming up with new excuses, each one more ludicrous than the last. He tried to convince me that it wasn't my place, that I didn't need to get involved in their personal drama. But I couldn't just walk away. This internal battle raged inside me for what felt like days. My rational side knew what was happening was wrong, that I had to step in, that I couldn't stand by and let Jonathan suffer. But Liam, he had this way of twisting my emotions, of making me second-guess myself. He'd say anything to protect Emily, to protect his family. And the more he spoke, the more I found myself faltering, questioning if maybe I should just let it go. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I had to do the right thing, no matter the cost. So, when I finally made up my mind, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I had to tell Jonathan. Before I did, though, I wanted to give Liam one last chance to understand. I told him I was going to spill the beans, and that's when things exploded. The fight we had that day was nothing short of a nightmare. I thought we had argued during his gambling issues, but this was worse. He couldn't or wouldn't listen to me. He told me I had no right to interfere in his sister's life. He said I was ruining everything. The more he defended Emily, the more something inside me started to twist. I wondered, was he really this defensive because he was trying to rationalize her actions? Or was it something else? Something darker? I couldn't shake the thought. Could it be that he was defending Emily's infidelity because he was hiding something of his own? I had no proof, no reason to think that he was cheating too. But that seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't ignore it. I drove to Jonathan's house, heart pounding, ready for whatever came next. I wanted to confront Emily too, but of course, she wasn't there. So, I told Jonathan everything. As the words left my mouth, his face crumpled. He broke down right in front of me. He had suspected something was off with Emily, but without proof, he had never been able to confront her. I explained what I had seen, how she had acted so flustered, how the man had left shortly after. But Jonathan? He was a man of honor. He couldn't accuse her without certainty. He thanked me, but it was clear that this was the beginning of the end for them. And for the next few weeks, nothing much changed. Liam and I drifted into an icy silence, both of us holding our secrets. I wasn't sure if he had told Emily or Jonathan what I had discovered, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to break wide open. Then, one day, the bomb dropped. Jonathan told me, in a quiet voice, that he and Emily were getting a divorce. The news sent shockwaves through their families, through everyone who thought they were the perfect couple. They had always been seen as the ideal match, the love story everyone envied. But now it was over. Emily? She didn't take it well. A few days later, she stormed into my house, yelling at me, cursing me with words I can't even repeat. I knew immediately that Liam had told her everything. She screamed at me with all the fury of someone who had been caught, her rage completely unhinged. And me? I stood there, calm, silent. But inside, my heart was heavy. The weight of the situation was unbearable, but I had reached my limit. With cold resolve, I looked at Liam and told him the truth. The mess that had unraveled between us wasn't my doing. I wasn't the one who had chosen betrayal. I wasn't the one who had let lies fester and poison our lives. He was the one who had cheated, and now he was facing the consequences of his actions, not me. He couldn't hide from that truth, no matter how hard he tried. By this time, Liam and I had completely cut off communication. Living in the same house felt like an emotional torture that I had no choice but to endure, day after endless day. As the months dragged on, Emily and Liam began to manipulate everyone around them. Slowly but surely, they turned the rest of the family against me. Emily forbade her children from having anything to do with me, and Liam fed his mother lies, painting me as the villain. He told her I had poisoned Jonathan's mind with stories about Emily's infidelity, and that was why they were splitting up. Suddenly, I was the enemy in everyone's eyes. They were all so caught up in their own judgment and hatred toward me that they couldn't even see the real culprit. The family, which had once seemed like a place of safety, had become an ugly, toxic pit. They didn't realize it, but I did. I had finally had enough. I snapped. Liam and I had been struggling ever since his gambling addiction had surfaced. That was the beginning of the end, and the drama that followed only sealed my decision. I knew, deep down, there was no saving our marriage. I couldn't respect a man who would not only betray my trust but defend his sister's cheating. He acted guilty, as if he knew he'd done something wrong, and to be honest, I had a nagging suspicion he was cheating on me, too. But by then, I had emotionally checked out. Even if he was having an affair, it wouldn't have bothered me. I was already gone, mentally. The divorce was inevitable, and there was nothing he could say to change my mind. So, I gathered the family together. This was it. I was going to expose the truth. I told them about Emily's affair, how I had caught her with a stranger and confided in Liam. But he had defended her without question, no matter how hard I tried to make him see reason. When I told Jonathan about the affair, the brother and sister team turned on me. They began to smear my name everywhere. And all the while, I was being mistreated and insulted by them. I'd had enough. I told them all, in no uncertain terms, that I would no longer tolerate the way they treated me. To my shock, even my ex-in-laws sided with their children. It was at that moment, standing in front of that room full of people, that I realized just how insane this family was. I was finally free. The decision to walk away from them was clear, and it was for my mental health. When I announced that I was divorcing Liam, the silence in the house was deafening. Liam looked like someone had hit him with a sledgehammer. His face was pale, his eyes wide in disbelief. And I can't even describe how satisfying it was to see him like that. I told him then, in front of everyone, that he needed to move out. 2 weeks. That was all he had. I wasn't going to play games anymore. I was done. His tone shifted immediately. Suddenly, he was apologizing, begging me to reconsider. He tried to act like nothing had happened, suggesting date nights and spa trips, as if I could be bought back with simple gestures. But he didn't get it. He didn't understand the depth of my pain, the years I had wasted. I had to sit him down and tell him, point blank, that I was leaving because I didn't like the man he had become. His behavior, his choices, they were too much for me. I couldn't look at him and see anything worth saving. I had made up my mind. It wasn't easy, watching him struggle to accept that I was done. But eventually, he packed his things and moved out. Our divorce was finalized shortly after that. At the same time, Jonathan and Emily went their separate ways. Within months, I sold my house and moved to another state for a better job. I wanted to leave it all behind, the drama, the pain, the toxic family dynamics. I had a new life waiting for me, one where I could rebuild and find peace. 3 years have passed since that decision. I haven't spoken to anyone in that family, except for the occasional brief exchange with Jonathan. But that's all it is, brief. Nothing more. Then, just 2 days ago, I got a message from a strange number. It was Liam. He was crying on the other end of the phone, hysterical, telling me he had made the biggest mistake of his life by letting me go. He said he should have fought harder to keep me, that he should have trusted me all along. I wasn't in the mood to console him. I asked him what had happened. Apparently, he had recently married one of Emily's friends, and everything seemed fine at first. But then, out of nowhere, both Emily and his new wife had gone missing. He was frantic, convinced something had happened to them, and had called the police. The police told him they were safe, but that they had asked him not to contact them. Turns out, both Emily and his new wife had emptied his bank account and run away together. Liam was crying like a baby, and honestly, I almost wanted to laugh. He had done this to me, after all. He had ruined my life, betrayed me, and showed me the ugliest side of himself. Now, it seemed like karma was coming for him. I told him I was sorry for what was happening, but that I had no interest in getting involved in his personal mess. He wanted my help, of course. He needed me to track down where they were and give him financial advice since I had helped him out last time. But I was done. I told him to take a hike, that I owed him nothing. He was on his own now, facing the consequences of his actions, and I wasn't about to bail him out. I hung up on him. And deep down, I felt a satisfaction that I can't quite describe. The man who had ruined me, who had put me through hell, was finally facing the consequences. And I was glad. I had walked away from him, and I had no regrets. I had worked so hard to fix things for him, only to be betrayed, time and time again. I should have left the moment I learned about the gambling, but I stayed. I stayed out of love. And what did it get me? Heartbreak, betrayal, and years of wasted time. Now, I'm glad it's over. I'm glad I walked away. It was the best decision I ever made. It turns out that Emily and Liam's wife, who, by the way, is just 21 years old, had gone ahead and booked a lavish trip to Europe. They're spending freely, flaunting it on social media every chance they get. But there's something about the constant updates that doesn't sit right with me. It's all too public, too easy to track. They've posted all over Instagram, but I'm starting to suspect something more. They might have everyone, even their own family, blocked. No one knows what's really happening behind the scenes. Now, I'm left torn, wondering if I should tell Liam what I've uncovered. Part of me feels obligated to tell him, to give him the information, at least he'd know what's going on. But then again, I can't shake the thought that if I tell him, he'll just cling to me, using my help as a crutch. He's already bombarded me with texts, long, dramatic sob stories about hitting rock bottom, and how he needs my help to get out of it. How many times do I have to deal with this? But there's another side to this. If I manage to find out where they are, he could too. He just has to use his brain and stop whining like a baby. Then, out of nowhere, he texts me again, this time claiming he can't survive without me. And despite the pity party he's throwing for himself, I'm still debating whether or not to give in. But something deep down tells me I can't keep giving him the satisfaction of my involvement. It's been a while since my last update, and I'd hope things might quiet down. But, of course, life doesn't make things that easy. The drama stirred again. This time, I decided to let Liam know what I had found out. He thanked me, of course, but then he just started asking for more. And more. No, I told him. This is where I draw the line. I'm not entertaining any more of his favors, no more calls. And as expected, he wasn't happy with that. He didn't argue, but I could feel the tension in the silence that followed. For a couple of days, I thought it was finally over. No more messages. No more pleas. But then, 2 nights ago, the phone rings in the middle of the night. It's my ex-mother-in-law, sounding frantic, terrified. She says that Liam and his new wife are in legal trouble, and she needs me, because I'm a lawyer. Apparently, Samantha, Liam's new 21-year-old wife, had actually eloped with him, and now her parents are threatening to press charges for abduction. I could feel my heart stop. I sat up in bed like I'd been struck by lightning. My ex-husband had run off with a 21-year-old? What was going on? As much as I didn't want to believe it, there was the cold reality of it. Liam had taken her away. Despite her being of legal age, it still felt predatory, manipulative. The bile rose in my throat. The man I had been married to, a man I thought I knew, was capable of something this vile? I couldn't stomach it. I told my ex-mother-in-law that if Samantha had left of her own free will, the accusations would be baseless, and there was nothing they could do. But then, my mother-in-law dropped a bombshell. Samantha was now backing away from the marriage, claiming that Liam had groomed her when she was a minor. She said he had been involved with her before she turned 18. The horror of it hit me all over again. The revelation hit me hard, like a punch to the gut. I did the math. This wasn't just about a bad marriage. Liam had been defending his sister for all this time because he was just as guilty, grooming a young girl. In a fury, I told my ex-mother-in-law they all deserved to rot in the afterlife. They had destroyed this poor girl's life. But she wasn't done begging. She wanted me to represent Liam in his case. She apologized, saying they were all sorry. But I made it clear there was no way in hell I would ever defend him. I told her I would fight against him, sure, but not for him. When I reminded her that Liam had used my resources to rebuild his life after cheating on me with a minor, I could hear the disbelief in her voice. She cursed me out and hung up. I hadn't slept since. I couldn't wrap my mind around how someone I thought I knew so well could turn out to be a predator. I didn't see any warning signs, or maybe I just didn't want to. Either way, I felt disgusted just being connected to him. He deserves to rot in jail for what he did. What made it worse was that this poor girl, she was manipulated, groomed. I can't even blame her entirely. She was 17 when this began, and Liam was 38. He had been involved with a schoolgirl. Someone so much younger, someone who should have been protected, not preyed upon. And now, after all of it, he'd married her. The thought of Emily, his sister, possibly having introduced them makes everything even more twisted. If she played a role in this, then the whole family is just as dangerous. But at least, in the end, I escaped. I got away from them before things got any worse. That's the only peace I have. The silence has been oddly comforting. I haven't heard from anyone in the family, not a single word. My ex-mother-in-law has gone radio silent, and Liam, well, he's been quiet too. Jonathan, however, has spoken to me. He's filled in a few gaps. Apparently, Emily and Samantha came back home, but Samantha started changing her story. She said she'd been groomed and wanted a divorce. Now her parents are involved, threatening to press charges. Jonathan told me that the case her parents were building had shaky ground, but it scared the family enough for Liam to cough up money to keep it all quiet. It's all falling apart for him now. He's paying for his crimes, in his own way. And Emily? She's playing innocent. She's telling everyone Samantha got the money from him, though nobody believes her. But with no one else to back her up, they're stuck in this web of lies. And in a sad, twisted turn of events, it's come out that the entire family is now struggling. They're downsizing, all of them moving into a one-bedroom apartment. Liam's broke, and Emily's working a minimum wage job. Jonathan has custody of the kids, and Emily tried calling him for money again, no surprise there, but he didn't fall for it. It's clear now. The whole family is trapped in this vicious cycle of dependency. Messed up beyond belief. And I'm just relieved I got out when I did. I never wanted to be part of their dysfunction in the first place. Now, Liam, he deserves to rot in jail for what he's done. He's a predator, a criminal. And if he could do it once, he'll do it again. But for now, I can only hope that this is the end of it. That I won't have to deal with them anymore. I've blocked every possible way they could contact me, and I'm praying for peace, for once, just peace.